look at the baby. Joel, who is that?
This is Gedalia.
Gedalia. I haven't met Gedalia.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hello, Gedalia.
Say Gedalia Gadol Yiyeh.
Welcome to our shir, everybody, Gedalia included. Let's start. We're in Siman 307 Shin Zion, and Mimi is going to start the ball rolling for us with the Shulchan Aruch. So I'll give it over to you, Mimi.
Great, thank you. So I was actually going to start with a Gemara, but
Excellent.
yeah. So great. So this Seif is about forbidden speech on Shabbos. So I'm going to share my screen. I'll just get started in the Gemara. V'daber davar, again, quoting that pasuk from Yeshayahu. דבר דבר, שלא יהיה דיבורך של שבת כדיבורך של חול. דיבור אסור הוא מותר. So that our speech on Shabbos shouldn't be like our speech during the week. Okay, I'll keep going. So Rashi, so we can see Rashi says, "Kigon mekach umimkar b'cheshbonos." Right. So Rashi is talking about it being strictly business, but Tosfot bring in that that doesn't work because we already have, we already have that from somewhere else. So it must be a different type of speech. And they bring it here, I'll read it. פרש בקונטרסט כגון מקח ממכר ואין יראה רבינו תם. דה כבר נפקא ממצוא חפצך. אלא אומר רבינו תם כדאמר בויקרא רבא. And so they bring in this story in Vayikra Rabbah and from the Yerushalmi that are even more stringent about what one may speak about on Shabbos. And so I thought we would look at the Yerushalmi. I'm also just thinking, okay, I guess let me know if I should pause or if there's anything you want to discuss further. I'm not really sure exactly what this presentation is supposed to be like, but
you're doing good. You're doing good so far.
Great. Thanks. So, where are we? Okay. Do you see my Microsoft Word screen? You can give me a thumbs up if you see it.
It takes a few seconds to come up, and then yeah, we see it now.
Okay, great. Here we have a much more extreme statement. לא ניתנו שבתות וימים טובים אלא לאכילה ולשתייה. And but so we end up basically having the only things that you can do on Shabbos are to eat, drink, and speak divrei Torah. And then we have these, I think it's actually a really sweet drasha that like Hashem took a rest from speaking, so like we should also take a rest from speaking. And then they go so far as to bring this story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's mother, who would talk a lot and was then quiet when Rashbi told her it's Shabbos. And having like midocha kitul ishor shalom Shabbat. That, right, like only as a last case scenario, we were permitted to even just like, ask someone's welfare on Shabbos. So here, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Okay, so I didn't get to pull up the Torah and Shulchan Aruch on my screen, but I'll just read from them.
Just tell us where you're reading from.
Great. So Shin Zayin Seif Aleph in the tour.
Good.
Can I get a thumbs up if you got it? Thanks, Orlandis. It looks like you're pulling it up. Should I wait?
I think you can go.
Okay, great. ודבר דבר, דרשו חז"ל, שלא יהיה דיבורך של שבת כדיבורך של חול. ירקח אסור לומר דבר פלוני יעשה למחר, או סחורה פלוני יקנה למחר. Okay, so Tur understands this mostly like Rashi of not making business plans, or even speaking of business plans for after Shabbos. ואיתה בירושלמי דאפילו בשיחת דברים בטלים צריך שלא להרבות. So Tur here interprets, whatever was being discussed in the Yerushalmi that seemed to be very extreme, of like not even asking, Bishlom, asking someone how they're doing, or speaking anything other than Torah. The Tur say, not to speak a lot of Dvarim B'Telim, which I mean, I don't know exactly what he means. I imagine it's open to interpretation. And we have the Beis Yosef bringing in some things here about the issue of discussing news, politics, and like Divrei Melachim, which gets more pronounced in the Magen David on the Shulchan Aruch. So I'd rather just take us there right now to the Shulchan Aruch.
Quick question before you go on.
Yeah.
Is it only talking about making business plans, or is it saying just making any plans, or also talking business? I'm going to go home tonight. I'm at a friend's for Shabbat. I'm going to catch the 9 o'clock bus tonight. Well, that's making plans about after Shabbat during Shabbat. That's not necessarily business.
That's a great question. So I think, right. So Rashi, Rashi seemed to be quite clear that it's about business. The Tur.
The Tur seems to separate them.
Right, meaning because ploni ekneh.
Ploni esela machar, o schora ploni ekneh. It's like giving two separate examples, it seems.
Yeah. I wonder why you would need the second one, though, if the first one wasn't also a business one to some extent, right? It's like if you can't talk about, just anything you're going to do tomorrow, you can't talk about business tomorrow, right?
Well, business is your parnasa, so you maybe need to be reminded, even if it's about your parnasa, don't bring that up.
Good point. You might say, I have to talk about this. It's my parnasa.
I am moded to that. Yeah.
That's Gemara. Your mind has been warped by the Gemara.
Right, and I'll say that just to add something, if you look at the Be'er Tev on the Eseh, it says Afilu Devar Mitzvah. So they're really taking on all points of non-activity, Shabbat activity that does not happen on that Shabbat, including something that is as lofty as a mitzvah.
Yeah.
But I mean, let me just interject one drasha idea. That we said the Shabbat is me'ein olam haba. That it's you should look at Shabbat ki'ilu kol ma'asecha asuim. In other words, you're not trying. You have to view the world as though you're not trying to accomplish anything. So therefore, even amidst, in other words, you're finished. You're finished your work. In olam haba, you finished. There's nothing to do. You're right. So you've done all of your activities of your life. So Shabbat is a little bit of that. So therefore, you don't even a mitzvah is if it's not about something you're going to do on Shabbat, it's not relevant to Shabbat, and it's a distraction.
Yeah, I mean that was pretty intense, but I think something that I took from this learning also was to go back to the Gemara. It's not exactly on this particular drasha, but a little further down, the same discussion, פסיעה גסה נוטלת אחד מ-500 ממאור עיניו של אדם, ומהדר לי בקידושא דבי שמשי. And so the Gemara here is saying that like taking these long strides during the week, or just in general, like kind of decreases our eyesight, but that it gets restored during Kiddush. This maybe is a bit drashy, but I think there's something there about like what are large strides. Like I think large strides are when you're in a rush and you're always going forward and looking towards the next thing. And I think there's something about the invitation of Shabbat to be present and stop looking forward, and be present in the kiddush, and that restores some vision for looking inward, and looking in the present. And just another thing I thought that was interesting is the Magen David on the Shulchan Aruch, who brings further what the Beis Yosef brought up earlier about news.
Could you give the address again?
What?
Could you give the where we're reading?
So I'm in Magen David on Seif Aleph of Shin Zayin in the Shulchan Aruch. Here, I'll stop my screen share. So the דיבור מתחיל is אבל מי שאינו מתענג מותר לו אומרים וכולי. So he's working on like the Shona Val in the Ramah, who says that, well, I'll go back to the Ramah. אדם שסיפור שמועות ודברי חידושים הוא עונג להם, מותר לספרם בשבת כמו בחול. So if you're interested in news, it's like enjoyment for you, then you can talk about them. אבל מי שאינו מתענג, אסור לומרם כדי שיתענג בהם חברו. But you can't. But if you don't enjoy talking about the news, you can't. It's a sort to talk about them just to please your friend. And the Magen David goes on to say, like, this is a thing that there are so many people who like to talk about the news and gossip, but like none of them really enjoy it. And I think that there's something really interesting there too about about Oneg Shabbat and refraining from that kind of speech, and like a reminder to not turn the experience of Shabbos into pleasing others' oneg, but finding our own true oneg.
I just want to say I enjoy this very much, but it's chol, so I'm allowed to enjoy everything. But no, all I say is creating a theory of leisure from these texts would be a very theory of Shabbos leisure, a theory of leisure. I don't think there's any theory of leisure, I'll just say it like that, amongst Chazal and amongst poskim in terms of chol, and maybe they could eke out a theory of leisure. I think that actually there is a term. The term for theory of leisure during chol would be called bitul zman, and the theory of leisure in Shabbos is only Shabbos. It's not exactly taking 2 weeks off in the country or at the hotel with all the other Jews who can afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. I think you wrapped it up there. Yes.
What?
We can go on to.
Yep, I took my 15 minutes.
You did it perfect. You did it exactly. Thank you. And so Noam, you're up next, and I gave you double duty because it's also Sif number 2 and also a Gemara a Rosh in Baba Metzia.
A Rosh, right. I actually think the citation of the Rosh was inexact. I think it's actually 7.6, not 7.5, but I found it. So we're good to go.
I wanted to make sure you worked hard.
I appreciate the vote of confidence. So I'm just going to basically take us through.
Oh, wait, I
the
corrected it though.
Shulchan
No, actually, I told you, right? I corrected you personally, right? No?
I don't think so, but maybe you
somebody
did.
else.
Maybe it was my
There was
mistake.
another mistake. There was another mistake in my sources that I corrected. Fine, go ahead.
I will take the mistake. What I'm going to do is we're just going to go through the Shulchan Aruch, and through that we will lead ourselves into the Rosh. And as I'm presenting, I will speak out / read some of the clarifications that Mishnah Brura and a couple of the other Nosei Kalim bring in, because through that we get a sort of a much bigger picture as to what exactly is being allowed and what exactly is not being allowed. And sort of, I think, at least one of the points we're going to see acts as a nice counterbalance to the Yerushalmi that Mimi brought, and sort of saying like nothing whatsoever, and this sort of makes it a little bit of a leniency. So we're going to get into the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Zayin Seif Bet. Asor liskor poalim velo lomar leino yudi liskor lo poalim b'Shabbat. So it's forbidden to hire workers, and you can't say to a non-Jew to rent out, to hire other workers on Shabbat. And what I want to point out first is that this Asor liskor poalim that the Mechaber starts with is derived from this pasuk we've been seeing so much from Yeshayahu, specifically the section that says Mimso Chetzecha, how both our analysis of last week's Siman and this week's Siman is really tied intrinsically to that verse. And what's really interesting here is that it says the Shulchan Aruch really seems to say a blanket statement. The lo lomar leino yudi liskor lo po'alim b'Shabbat. And the Nosei Kalim, both Magen Avraham and the Mishnah Brura in Chet says, and this applies to basically doing any non-Shabbos activity, but he includes a very important leniency. You're only prohibited to tell non-Jews to do something prohibited if it is actually prohibited on Shabbat. If there is something that is a minhag not to do on Shabbat, or it is a unnecessary chumrah, that is not considered under the framework of this, and seemingly you'd actually be permitted to ask someone who is not Jewish to do that act. And I think that's really an important thing for us.
You know, it could be something like, let's say that's a safek. Some people allow, some people don't allow. Like, you know, maybe opening a metal bottle cap or something. Some people allow, some people don't allow.
Exactly. Since it is not deen and it is a chumrah ba'alma, you might be able to put that in that category and ask someone who isn't Jewish to do that for you. And that sort of makes sense because the whole notion of Amirah LeAkum is that you don't ask a non-Jew to do things that you can't do. Well, theoretically, if you would actually be able to allow to do those things, you would be able to ask a non-Jew to do those as well. So continuing on with the Shulchan Aruch, Afal pi she'en ha'Yisrael sarich lo tam melacha ela lachar Shabbat. And we're very clear that it's not only that the action that you're asking the non-Jew is only out of bounds on Shabbat, but it's even if the action is to be done after Shabbat. So you're not actually going to get any sort of benefit from this thing that you're asking your non-Jewish friend to do on Shabbat for you, but it's still prohibited. And I actually think that is sort of related to the previous Saif that we see. We're trying to create a Shabbostic environment. And once you ask a non-Jew to do something, even if it's not actually happening on Shabbat, you are still sort of breaking out this Avirah that we're trying to bring together. So we will continue. And this is, I think, actually the key line of this Saif and really pretty much all of the Saifim that we've been seeing in the past couple of weeks. Shekol ma shehu asor lasoto, asor amar leino yehudi lasoto. That, I think, is like the key line, it's forbidden to ask the non-Jew anything that is forbidden for him to do. That is like the basic standard that we're sort of applying. So in the same way that you can't do something on Shabbat to prepare yourself for after Shabbat, you also can't ask someone who isn't Jewish to do that as well. Rav Land, do you want to say something?
Emphasizing the word asur. That is really asur for you, just based on what you said earlier.
Right.
Mamash asur.
Yes, absolutely asur. Anything that is not that is necessarily. But before we go on to the next section of this Seif, I want to bring our attention to the Rosh, which Rav Nachum sent out. And this is coming from Baba Metzia 7:6. And we actually saw this Gemara a couple weeks ago. It's based on the Gemara in which the Gemara is questioning what happens when you tell your non-Jewish friend, your non-Jewish worker, to muzzle an animal, and whether you can get benefit from that. The underlying question is, do we say Yashrut, as in Yashrut is prohibited for an Amirah LeAkum only in the case of Shabbat, where there is where there's a skila penalty, or is it anything? So the Rosh sort of goes here, and we're not gonna read the whole thing, but we're gonna go to a couple important lines. It starts with Ki Amrinan Amirah LeAkum Yashrut. I don't know what edition you all have, but in my edition, it's like 10 lines from the bottom.
As Noam said, you had an email about this about a week ago.
Right.
I'll look for it in your email.
Right. So I'm just going to read. Ki Amrinan Amirah LeAkum Yashrut Hamile Shabbat D'Isur Skila. So when we say Amirah LeAkum is prohibited by Yashrut, this is only like a case of Shabbat, which is an Isur Skila. So this is sort of the quoting from the Gemara, and this is what the Rosh is about to say. Kan pasak Rav Saja Gaon zal dasor la'adam she'amar l'nochri erev Shabbat helach ma'ot v'kaneh v'Shabbat kach v'kach. From here, Rav Saja Gaon poskins that it is forbidden for a Jew to say to a non-Jew on erev Shabbat, here, take coins and purchase X and Y for me on Shabbat. So this is the important part of this Rosh. But it's really interesting because 2 lines after that, the Rosh explicitly says, V'nireh li de'ein raya mikan. And he seems to rebut what Rav Saja Gaon said, and says, no, it's not a proper derivation. And if you actually keep reading in the Rosh, which we unfortunately don't have time right now, he actually doesn't come back to saying that's actually still the deen, even though he breaks Saja Gaon's proof. But to sort of see where the Shulchan Aruch gets this actually same law.
Can you just wait? Just let me interrupt you. Can you tell us what Colonel? What is the point of Rav Sadia Gaon?
So the point of Rav Sadia Gaon, which we're going to see in our Saif, is that it's prohibiting. Rav Sadia Gaon is saying that it prohibits a Jew to ask a non-Jew, even on Friday, to do something on Shabbat. In the case of the Rosh, it gives the exact example of doing some sort of commerce, purchasing for someone. But in the language of the Shulchan Aruch, it opens up it to any malacha, and it says, "V'afilu lomar lo kodem haShabbat lasoto b'Shabbat asor." And even to tell him, and this is doing any malacha before Shabbat, it's forbidden to do on Shabbat. But the point that I'm trying to suss out right now is, even though the Rosh quotes Rav Saja, he himself in this Rosh does not subscribe to that. And if you actually turn to the Beit Yosef, he sort of flippantly says, well, the Rosh quotes Saja Gaon, and he says that the proof isn't compelling, but in reality, he actually believes in that. And the way he's getting that is because if you go into Piskei Harosh, which was actually written by the Torah, he says explicitly, "Ve'asor lo mar lo nochri be'erev Shabbat helach ma'ot v'kaneli b'Shabbat kach v'kach." So even though he doesn't accept proof from our Gemara, he accepts the essence of the deen as it pertains to Shabbat. So I find that to be pretty interesting, but we don't have time to go through the whole Rosh right now. So basically, even on Erev Shabbat, it's forbidden to ask a non-Jew for you to do something on Shabbat. And now we're going to go back into the Shulchan Aruch, and it's going to finish up this halacha. Aba mutar lo marlo achar haShabbat, lama lo asita devar ploni b'Shabbat shavad, af al pi shemivin mitoch devarav sheritzono sheyasena b'Shabbat haba. However, it is permitted to tell the non-Jew after Shabbat, why didn't you do this thing for me on Shabbat, the Shabbat that just ended, even though the non-Jew will then know that on the following Shabbat, you want him to do this thing. And we sort of have a machloket achronim based on this last line, where the Taz Magen David points out that in another Siman, later on in the Siman, the Ramah points out that it's forbidden to hint to a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbat, because even though you're hinting, you're actually telling them to do that. So based on that, the Taz Magen David actually says that is the Ikar Halacha, and the procedure that the Shulchan Aruch necessarily lays out here is not necessarily a fair procedure. But can
Mishnah Brura, yeah, okay. But can you? I mean, I know I'm eating into your time, but can you answer? What? It's not a stira. It's two different cases.
Right. So that's the response by that's the response by the Mishnah Brura, in that it's not a stira because it's not so much about answering. That when the Taz quotes the Ramah, he's talking about when you hint to a non-Jew on Shabbat. But the Mishnah Brura is pointing out here that you're not doing anything on Shabbat here. The only thing you are saying is after Shabbat, and that's why it is allowed. So the Mishnah Brura actually accepts the procedure laid down by the Shulchan Aruch and says that after Shabbat, since you're just saying, I really wish you would have done this, even though you're really hinting to the person, because it's not actually a sort to do that not on Shabbat, it's permitted to do that as well. That is what I have.
Excellent, Noam. I just want to emphasize that last point because it's an amazing point here. What we're saying is that the whole isser of Amirah, in other words, Amirah applies also to hinting. Hinting is also Amirah. You're hinting that you want to do something. That's also communicating. It's telling him. Any kind of communication is prohibited. But what's not prohibited is a hint when it's not Shabbat. In other words, it's not Shabbat. So now you also are not allowed to tell him. Right? We also learned that. You can't tell somebody before Shabbat, do this for me on Shabbat, because he's doing it for you. But you could hint to him to do it. And that's sort of a little loophole, which is, I think, important to remember. You can hint to a Gentile to do something for you before Shabbat. Okay, so that's I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Can I ask you a question about that? I'm probably cutting into somebody's time. Maybe I'll cut in my own time. But it's like generally when we have a process that you start before Shabbat, it's only usually an Isur, Shema XY, it's not actually Asur in itself. It's Asur because you might come to do something on Shabbat. Is that the same thing here? Right? That it's Asur to ask a non-Jew to do something for you before Shabbat, to ask him to do something on Shabbat because you might do it on Shabbat? Or is this actually, just an Isur on its own?
It's a good question. I mean, we've discussed this a lot in the previous couple of shiurim about whether, in other words, he's doing your dot. He's doing what you want him to be done. And does it matter that you told him before Shabbat or not? Maybe it doesn't matter on the one hand. I mean, I'm not going to answer your question, but I see that side of it. I see the side of it that says he's doing your dot for you because of your words, because you told him. So he's accomplishing. But But I think there's also the element, definitely the element of, if we let you, I think we've seen that also, if we let you tell him before Shabbat, then you'll come to tell him on Shabbat. You won't see the distinction. So I think both aspects are relevant here. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to say which one is the 100%. All right, Andre, you're up. If you're there.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, now we hear you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to share something very fast. Blah, blah, blah. Do you see it? I don't hear you. Do you see it?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
It looks amazing.
Hey, so I just had, I think, the easiest one of all. And I'm just going to read through the Shulchan Aruch. אסור לתת לעכו"ם מעות מערב שבת, לקנות לו בשבת, אבל יכול לומר לו, קנה לעצמך, ואם אצטרך, אקנה ממך לאחר השבת. So he's saying it is forbidden to give to a non-Jew some coins, so he buys something for you during Shabbat and you give them before Shabbat. However, you can still tell him, buy something from you, and then if I need afterwards, after Shabbat, of course, I will buy from you.
But by the way, let me interrupt you for a second. This is another example of hinting before Shabbat. You're hinting to him to buy extra, but it's before Shabbat.
Exactly. And so we're going to go directly to the Beit Yosef. And so the way he created this halacha afterwards in the Shulchan Aruch is that he brought together two opinions, the one of Rav Sadia Gaon here that you see, in which he forbids to give the first part of the halacha, to give coins, me'erev Shabbat, itzchach ma'ot, ve'kaneh lo, blah, blah, blah. And then he brings another opinion, the one that is in green here, from Rabbeinu Yerucham, who brings a set of opinions. And this is the one that if I want, I can buy from you afterwards, after Shabbat. Okay, so this is how he created he compiled this halacha. But I think the interesting part of the Beit Yosef is not this, how he created the halacha after in the Shulchan Aruch, but he brings after the Hagahot Maimonot, and they are very interesting because what they bring is what Joel was just saying. What happens if you say to a non-Jew before, just as you do stuff that you leave doing during Shabbat that are forbidden, okay? And then in the Hagahot Maimoniot, they bring Shabbat 17, in which all these cases are allowed by Beit Hillel here at the end. So for example, one of them is soak dry ink in water, and then because they're going to be softened during Shabbat. So one could think that this is a kushya on the opinion that you shouldn't be able to tell a non-Jew to do something for you afterwards in Shabbat. However, the Beit Yosef here on the left, what he says is that this is not the case because for the non-Jew, it is impossible because on Shabbat is the only day of the shuk. So for him, he won't have a choice but to buy it during Shabbat. Whereas if you tell him he's not able to do it on a different day, okay? So you knew he was going to do it on Shabbat when you gave him the coins, and this is what the Beit Yosef at the end is saying that is the problem. He says at the end, "Vezeu ikar hachiluk d'bainach, eino omer lo sheyaseh b'Shabbat." Okay, so the problem is that you know whether you say it or not that he's going to do it on Shabbat, and that's the forbidden thing. Okay, and that's it.
Right, which is the well-known halacha, or that when if you give your dry cleaning, let's say to the Gentile right before Shabbat, and you say, here, do this for me, and you're going to pick it up Motzei Shabbat, then that's not allowed. You have to give enough time. You have to give it to him, let's say Friday morning, and say, do it whenever you want, and you'll pick it up Motzei Shabbat, and then he has a possibility of doing it not on Shabbat. What's
the halacha term for that?
Good. It's called
Kadei
Shiase. Yeah.
Well, Kadei Shiase is after Shabbos, but the fact that nothing. Kadei Shiase is how much time after Shabbos, but the fact that he does it on his own time is probably adate. I
Right.
think it
That's
pertains
the
to
nafshe.
that's in nafshe. I think so. Okay.
Okay. But excellent. So what we saw there is that you can't tell him the whole reason why you have to hint to him to buy you the stuff in the shuk is because if you would tell him directly, then you would be essentially telling him to do work for you on Shabbat, because that's the only day that the shuk is open. So therefore, you're allowed to hint to him when it's not Shabbat to do that work, even though it's on Shabbat. Great
And then,
presentation.
another little thing that the Mishnah Berurah will expand on is Erev Shabbat. They will say also any day of the week. That's the only expansion, and it's an expansion that he took from the Magen Avraham. Like you can say on Monday buy these for me on Shabbat. That's also forbidden, not only from Erev Shabbat, like any day during the week. Yeah.
In other words, because you're directing him to do it on Shabbat, that's the problem. All right, so you're finished, yeah? Okay, so great, thank you. Asher, we're up to you. Sif Arba, the tour of the Shulchan.
Okay, yeah, a lot of Sif Arba was already just now covered with Sif Shalosh, at least the extension of the discussion. I started with the tour. The tour is a little bit strange, and Rav Nachman, you and I talked about this week. In the tour itself, it seems to jump from Seif Bet to Seif Hey, and there isn't really a Gimel or Dalet in there. And so the Gimel and Dalet I went on is in the Bet Yosef, as you told me, and the Bet Yosef that starts with Dalet that I did is the one with the Dibur Matchil. He says Katava Mordechai. So what the Beit Yosef says, Katava Mordechai, and this is Mordechai ben Hillel, which is the late 13th century. Katava Mordechai beperek kama de Shabbat, v'zal u'b'samag pasak dibutan latet la'akum ma'ot me'erev Shabbat liknot ma sheyirtzeh u'bilvad shelo yomar lo kaneh b'Shabbat or limsor lo. So you can give the non-Jew money right before Shabbat in order that he's going to buy it on Shabbat, but you cannot say, buy this on Shabbat. You can't specifically mention Shabbat. Even if it's completely understood that's what he's going to do. And the other example it gives, Olim solo begadim limkor, ubevad shelo yomar lo machor b'Shabbat, ela machor v'kaneh li, l'shechitach potz, ad kan l'shono. So the Mordechai, he's quoting the Mordechai up until now. You can give him money before Shabbat, just don't, to buy whatever you need on Shabbat, just don't specifically say on Shabbat. Same thing with giving him clothes that he's going to sell, as long as you don't say it's Shabbat. Rather, you just say, buy it whenever you feel like it. He then cites this is a case.
This is supposed to be a case where the shuk is open not on Shabbat.
He doesn't really say one way or the other. The Mishnah Berurah actually does address that, and I'll get to the Mishnah Berurah in a couple of minutes. He then cites the Sefer Mitzvot Katan, where he basically says it's okay to give the Jew non-clothes on Shabbat, but the condition that's mentioned in the Smak is not necessarily the not mentioning Shabbat, but that you provide all the payment for him in advance, and you arrange whatever you're paying him for what he's going to do. You've already paid him before Shabbat, so that you don't owe him money for something he did on Shabbat already. And he learns the same principle from a Braita that's in Shabbat Yutet Amud Aleph, and I'll just read the Braita. And unfortunately, I've been having internet problems, so I can't share my screen. So just going to have to trust me, this is what it says, unless you can also find it. It's on Yutet Amud Aleph in Shabbat. Tanu Rabbanan ein mashlichin igeret biyad goy erev Shabbat, ela im ken kotzetz lo damim. You can't send a letter, have a non-Jew deliver a letter for you on Shabbat unless you've already paid him. Like you can't give it to him on Friday unless you already pay him for it in advance. And so he's taking the same principle about the Igeret and applying it here. Like Joseph is applying it here for the clothes and for the money and for whatever else you're going to do. Where was I? It says, okay, Besamak matir leten lakum me'erev Shabbat malbushim limkor. and then he brings in the example from the Breita. דדמי למשלוח איגרת בידיו וקצץ לו שכר תשרי. ומשמע מדבריו שאם לא קצץ לו שכר אסור. So what he's extrapolating from it is that if you don't pay him, even though it doesn't say this actually in the Breita, and it doesn't say this in the Sefer Mitzvot Katan, he's saying if you don't pay him beforehand, then you can't give him this thing on Erev Shabbat. And then he also goes v'nira ושלא קצץ לו שכר, מותר לתת לו בדלת או בה' דומיה לאיגרת. So, if you don't pay beforehand, you can't do this on Friday. On Friday, if you give it to him without paying for him, then it's pretty much understood he's going to do it on Shabbat. If you give it to him on, say, Wednesday or Thursday, even if you haven't paid him, then the Beit Yosef is saying it's okay to give it to him on Wednesday, Thursday, even though he might deliver it on Shabbat, but you don't know that. And he mentions that the Rambam and the Rif both neither of them accept that. It says, so then in the Shulchan Aruch itself, where there actually is a Seif Daled, it's much more katsar la'inyan. Mutar latei LeAkum ma'ot me'erev Shabbat liknot lo bilvat shelo yomar lo kaneh b'Shabbat. Very simple. You can give non-Jew money before Shabbat that he makes the purchase, as long as you don't specifically tell him do this on Shabbat. And then the Rama says v'chen mutar liten lo b'gadim limkor ubilvat shelo yomar lo lemachran b'Shabbat, and he quotes also the Beit Yosef and the Siman. מי ששכר עכו"ם להוליך סחורתו ובא עכו"ם ולקחה מבית ישראל בשבת, אסור וראוי לאנוש העושה. I thought this was an interesting thing that the Rama added. He says, if you've made this arrangement beforehand, and then the non-Jew comes you've made the arrangement that a non-Jew is going to deliver something of yours. He's going to take something of yours and maybe you're shipping it overseas because you're making aliyah. So you pay him on Wednesday and he's going to come do it. And he comes to your house on Shabbat to actually take your stuff. Not only do you not give him the stuff, you're supposed to punish him. Actually, the Rama doesn't actually say, the Rama says, Ra'ui le'enoshato. It's appropriate to punish him.
I think it means you punished the Jew who allows his stuff to be taken.
I wasn't sure because it says ha'oseh. It says le'enosha ha'oseh.
Yeah, the one who permits the Gentile to take it.
Okay.
The one who's made such an arrangement. By the way, it says sechora.
Right,
it's merchandise.
It's merchandise, right? Bringing merchandise. Now, what's interesting in terms of punishment, Magen Avraham cites. Now, I don't know who this is, and you can help me. He says Rav Aleph Sasson. The only Aleph Sasson I could find lived about 350 years after the Magen Avraham, so I don't think he was quoting him. But he says, "Le'onesh ha'oseh lefi oshro b'mamon o b'malkot. Im ein lo mamon, v'katav Rav Aleph Sasson Siman Kuf Nun Vav de'im ta'a shesavar shemutar ein onshim oto v'ne'emar lomar she'asa b'shogeg." So Magen Avraham is saying that the punishment that we're talking about is either financial, or if he doesn't have the money to pay for it financially, it's with lashes. But the Magen Avraham also says, however, if he says the non-Jew made a mistake, I didn't tell him to come on Shabbat, and he came on Shabbat, and that wasn't meant to happen, then you don't need to punish him. You can go.
No, I think even more. I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to give him the stuff.
Okay.
I didn't even know that.
Because what he said, what was I had it? Okay, you're right. You're right. I misread that. And then Ber Hetev also cites the same Rav Sasson with the same thing. The Mishnah Berurah then brings up the case that not only that you asked about a couple of minutes ago, Rav Nachum, but also that Andres brought up in Tet Vav of the Mishnah Berurah. He says, "Ubilvat shelo yomar." ואם יום השוק שם בשבת, ובאותו מקום אינו מצוי לקנות כל אחד ביומו דשוקה, כמו שרגיל בעיירות קטנות. So he says, if you have this case where the item can only be bought in the shuk on Shabbat, and it's the only day that it's sold. And he even says, and this is common in the smaller towns, he still says, you still can't מזכיר לו יום שבת פירוש, בין שמבקשו לקנות עבורו או שנותן לו למכור ואפילו בהתחלת שבוע, אסור. במקום שמצוי קצת גם באשר ימים אין איסור, אלא אם כן מזכיר בפירוש יום השבת. Whatever you do, don't mention Shabbat. You can tell him it's not going to be on sale all week. I'm giving you the money to buy it whenever it is. Just don't mention Shabbat. And you can't even, and then he goes also into the hinting, you can't even say to him, where is it? אם אמר לו ישראל, ראה שאני צריך ללכת לדרכי למוצאי שבת, הרי גם כן מזכיר שיום שבת פירוש. That's also considered reminding that it's, mentioning Shabbat. And the other thing he says in י"ז מבית ישראל בשבת, אבל אם לקחה קודם שבת, אף על פי שמחליק בשבת מחוץ לתחום, שרת. So if with the merchandise, he's taking the merchandise and he's traveling, this non-Jew is traveling with your merchandise overseas on Shabbat, as long as he didn't come and take it from your house on Shabbat, it's okay. He's doing it v'dat nafshe. He's doing it on his own accord.
I have a question. How does, if you're allowed to give him the money, and as long as you don't mention Shabbat, doesn't that contradict Sif Gimel? Sif Gimel said you can't give him money Erev Shabbat to buy you something at all, unless you tell him he has to buy it for himself, or whatever. There wasn't any kind of talk involved. Because you just gave him money.
Right, here you're giving him the money. You're right. Hold on. Let me.
In Seif Gimel, it does say לקנות לו בשבת, right? אסור ליתן לאינו יהודי מעות מערב שבת לקנות לו בשבת.
As opposed to dollar, where it just says liknot lo, where it doesn't say b'Shabbat.
I'm saying the difference is that you didn't mention Shabbat.
Right. The whole thing with Sif Dalet.
You're also buying it on Shabbat.
Right. The major push throughout Sif Dalet is whatever you do, you don't mention Shabbat. Don't hint it, don't mention it, don't say it. And I think it's actually
we have to say about Gimel that the problem with Gimel is not particularly that he did it on Shabbat, but that you told him to do it on Shabbat.
Right. Right. And here you're not allowed to tell him to do it on Shabbat. You're giving him the money. He's going to buy it whenever he's going to buy it. And the same thing also with the clothes, with the letter, with any job you're having him do for you. If he's going to be doing it on Shabbat, then what Beit Yosef is saying very clearly is that that's only on the condition that you've already paid him. You can't owe him money for something he did for you on Shabbat.
Mm-hmm. So
this I thought was
interesting.
I was an interesting twist.
I once went to the town of Leghorn, Italy, Livorno, and I don't know. There might have been an Eruv there. There may have been, there may not have been. I don't know. But the person I was staying by would pick up the newspaper on Shabbat from the newspaper vendor. And I said to him, how can you do that? It's forbidden to buy. He says, oh, I paid him ahead of time. I have a manui. I pay the week. So if there would be an Eruv, is that permitted? Now this person I say was not well learned.
I would actually think so. It's not unlike, I remember my parents one year had a sabbatical in Paris, and we went and spent the Shabbat with them. And what did they do for Shabbat dinner? What a lot of the Jews there do is they have a restaurant they've paid in advance, and they go to the restaurant, and I don't think all of the waiters are Jewish, but it was a kosher restaurant. It had the Tudat from the Rabbanut of Paris. I'm not sure that's extremely different from.
This is very common in Germany as well. There used to exist a place in Berlin that did that. In Munich, in Frankfurt, you can still do that. It's very common.
So
you're talking about the restaurants. You're right. The restaurants for sure. But you're saying it's the same thing. You're saying the newspaper is the same thing. You're just paying for something ahead of time. Even though he presumably some Gentile, but presumably some malacha in the restaurant. No malacha was involved. In the restaurant, there were Jews working there, and they and they kept all the halachot of Shabbat. But here, the newspaper, it was a delivery truck that came in the morning and dropped off these newspapers at the shop, and
But what if you just get it delivered to your home on Shabbat? What's the difference?
Right, the newspaper boy is driving in his motorcycle and drops it off. You're asking him to do, he's doing a malacha for you on Shabbat. So why is that permitted? You're saying because...
Maybe it's not. You haven't paid him. You don't pay him until at the end of the month.
Well, if it's part of their
maybe that's the problem.
Actually, so this guy in Livorno was paying him ahead of time.
Right.
So wait, Joel wants to say if you're paying him...
Well, so two things. One is, if it's a newspaper being delivered, I imagine if it's their route, you might be able to say, well, they're going that way. Like, they're not making any extra turns for you. If they're, like every block home, maybe it's not so much the case anymore, but it used to be like every house on the block was getting the newspaper. Like, who cares? But maybe. But also I had a question, like kinyan, maybe we're going to the wrong masechet at this point, but like, there's like, the money is not the kinyan usually, right? It's usually when you actually take the newspaper, and there is an isur of kinyan on Shabbat in general.
Right. That's I think the main problem here. You're essentially going to the shuk. Whether money didn't change hands or not, you're buying that newspaper. You're picking it up, and I think it would be a problem. And the food, I mean,
or from the perspective of the person who delivered the newspaper, the moment it's on your doorstep, it's come into your possession.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if they are relying on Mashiach for the kinyan to have happened, and therefore whether that influences how we understand if the kinyan happened.
In other words, you're saying kinyan on Shabbat is forbidden of any form. Well, we do have a concept like that there is a concept that when I was yeshiva, they told us to, if you want to bring a bottle of wine to somebody, you have somebody else, somebody else is kone it for the host before Shabbat. You have your roommate, you can zaken la'adam shelo b'fanav. You can be mizake somebody in a tova, even though he isn't aware that you're doing that for him. So you can ask your roommate, lift up this bottle of wine for my hosts tonight, and that it should be nikne, should be bought now for them. And then when they get it, I'm just delivering it. It's not a kinyan anymore. That was a thing to do. There may be a different reason that food may not actually be. When you're sharing the food together,
you can share food on Shabbos.
Exactly.
Of course
there's a different reason, right? But if it's flowers, it might be a problem. In other words, flowers not food.
Muksa.
Yeah.
I would also think the problem wouldn't the newspaper be an issue of Maritayin?
I read on the chat here that the notion that could someone else take that magazine that you had ordered? No, which therefore means that the kinyan took place before. I don't know. I don't know if there's a kinyan issue. By the way, kotzetz, I'm not sure kotzetz means that it was paid. Kotzetz means that you set a price of what sending the garret.
I agree.
Is.
I agree.
I was thinking kotzetz is like carving, so it's like you sort of carve off the price.
Yeah. That's exactly.
You set the price.
Setting a price.
Okay.
Kotzetz means machir means to set a price.
Kotzetz is cut a deal. But yes, anyway.
One other question on the newspaper though, isn't there also an issue of Maritayin?
Yeah, that could also be a problem. Looks like you're buying it. Certainly, I thought he was buying it. I didn't understand what was going on. Okay. Anyway,
okay.
We should know from less.
15 minutes.
That should be our troubles. That was Asher. Let's have a break right now until 10 o'clock, and then we'll start with Joel Erevin. Maybe a minute before 10 o'clock. Okay, so let's take a short break.
Here off the mavoi, you made a shituf. Maybe that counts also for each individual chatzer. All right, and it's a big debate, I think, between Rebbe Meir and Rabbanan, if I remember correctly. All right, Amarle, but don't worry, we won't have to get there. Amarle halosh shtafinan, but we didn't make a shituf mevoat either, so we did nothing to allow us to carry between houses in this area on Shabbat. All right. So the problem, we need hot water for the kid. He says, so let's get a non-Jew to bring it, to say to a non-Jew, bring it. Which is a really interesting thing, right? We've seen so far all this stuff about we can't ask a non-Jew to do stuff on Shabbat. That's asur for us to do. Here, there seems to be a reason that we're allowed to ask them. And we'll talk about the different reasons why that might be. So Amar Abaye, all right, Abaye le'otve lamar, v'lo shavkan Rav Yosef. He says, I wanted to bring a challenge to the master, to hear it to Rabbah, but Rav Yosef didn't allow me. Amar Rav Yosef, we'll see it actually, he actually seems to also be present. It's a really good Brit Milah. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Kahana, Ki avinan be Rav Yehuda, Have Amarlan bedoraita modvinan tiyufta v'hadar avdina maseh, v'derabanan avdina maseh v'hadar modvinan tiyufta. If you have a challenge to something someone wants to do, if it's deoraita at stake, you should challenge before they act. But if it's a derabanan at stake, let them do what they need to do, and then you can challenge them.
And a tiyufta is potentially a killer challenge.
Yeah, for sure. That's so yeah, not just like, oh, I thought of this one point, but like you're just completely wrong, and this is asur. So because of that statement of Rav Yosef, he decided to hold himself back. Okay.
That's a very interesting. By the way, that's a very interesting hanhaga in life in general.
Yeah.
You see don't jump in. Somebody is doing something that's wrong, but it's only Rabbanan, so don't. So maybe they have some reason. Don't get involved. But you should get involved if it's Deraita. Actually.
Right. Yeah.
Which
So.
A lot of times we say, well, I don't want to ever get involved, but actually maybe you should.
So no, it's a really interesting point, and I wish we had some time to spend on it. Actually, it's like a really interesting idea in general. But there is also, they didn't bring this up here, but in this chapter, there's a whole thing that we're always makil about Eruvin, and that this isn't brought up here. But I guess there's just no Eruv, so there's not even a chance to be makil about it here. Okay, but of course, right now that Abaye has this challenge, we got to find out what it is. So levatar hachi. So afterwards, Amar le. So this is presumably Rav Yosef saying to him, "My ba'it leotve lamar." What challenge did you have for Rabbah? Amar le de Tanya. I don't know if it really is a Tanya. I haven't looked, but hazaa shvut v'Amirah LeAkum shvut. That sprinkling the mechatat on somebody, that's a shvut. You can't do that on Shabbat to make them tahor. V'Amirah LeAkum shvut, and asking an anju to do malacha on Shabbat is also a shvut. All right, those are both. We spent a lot of time defining shvut, so I'll just leave it as shvut for the moment. And by the way, I just want to do a side note as we get into this. Those two things, and Rashi brings this up, go together often, right? The mechatat is sprinkled on somebody so that they're tahor, they can do the korban pesach. And milah, right, of course, is what we're talking about. We're talking about Amirah LeAkum, but we're talking about Amirah LeAkum lemilah. And milah and the korban pesach are the two mitzvot aseh that get you karet if you don't do them. So this is a lot at stake right here that we're talking about too. So it's not just anything we're asked. We're any shvut. So, all right. Mahaza shvut ve'ena dochet Shabbat. Just as right, sprinkling the mechatat is a shvut, but you can't do it on Shabbat, even though it's for a mitzvah and a mitzvah taseh.
Let me stop you. We're on Samachet Amud Aleph now.
I just flipped over to Samachet Amud Aleph.
Yes.
Af Amirah LeAkum shvut ve'ena dochet Shabbat. So too, Amirah LeAkum following Hazah is a shvut, and you can't do it on Shabbat. It doesn't push aside Shabbat, even for a mitzvah. All right, and that's what Rashi says. Afilu bimkom mitzvah. It's the first Rashi on the page. Kegon lishchot pischo kidetam pesachim perak eludvarim. All right, so he says even for a mitzvah, and even for like a very high level mitzvah. Amarle, but all right. So this is Rav Yosef seemingly responding to Abaye. Velo shani lecha lo shnei shani lecha bein shvut de'it be'maseh l'shvut de'leit be'maseh. Wait, but don't you make a distinction between a shvut that has a maaseh and a shvut that doesn't have a maaseh? What that means is going to be an interesting question. But presumably the Amirah LeAkum is a shvut de'leit be'maseh. All right, and then we have this additional piece in the Gemara, which may not be in one of the Tosfots, but the Hamar lo Amar LeNochri zilachim, that the person didn't say to the Nochri, go heat water, right? Presumably he said, go take water, right? Which presumably might not be a maaseh in the sense that he didn't ask him to heat it, he's just asking him to bring it, okay? Not so clear though, right? The whole thing
But
yes,
he may end up heating it.
Exactly.
The hot water.
Yes. Yeah.
Water cools off. He may heat it.
Yeah. He could have brought it without heating it. If he had prepared hot water, then you're not requiring him to do a malacha.
Exactly, and we know in this story, right, there is hot water sitting in the house of Rabbah. So it does exist in this story. He's got his kumkum set up. I think, if I remember correctly, Rashi actually says not even if you go back to Samach Zayin Amud Bet Migo Beitai. Rashi says Mi Beitei de Rabba Ve'atino Kaya Beveit Acher. Oh, someone I thought I saw, maybe it was somebody else, talked about that it was actually, insulated, that this thing wasn't going to cool off so much. So it exists somewhere. I want to also point out before just a couple things. One is that the Tosfot on Samach Zayin Amud Bet, the Halo Arvinan, I think that's actually important to read here. So I just want to read it quickly. He says, Kodem Mila Haya, that this is the third Tosfot on that daf. This thing happened, we're talking about before the Milah, not after the Milah. Kida Parish Bekutrus, as Rashi explains, V'chein Mashma, and it also follows Midemedamehach Amirah LeHaza, because we compared asking the non-Jew to do it to sprinkling somebody with the Mechatat, which would be before the mitzvah. Shemishum mitzvah, lasot petach. It's like to allow you to do the mitzvah. Interestingly enough, Tosfot Rosh says lasot pesach here, but aval le'achar milah umishum sakana al zeh lo haya omer v'halo arvinan. But if it had been after the milah happened and there's sakana, the kid is actually in danger, we never would have said there's no eruv. Who cares? The pikoch nefesh hazriz harezeh mishubach kidaminim perak batra diyoma. Right? That's pikuach nefesh at that point. So we're not talking about pikuach nefesh case. All right? We're talking about a case where the child, for some reason, a non-pikuach nefesh, but he needs it before the milah, which the Meir, I think, it says it's for chizuk, but it's not necessarily dangerous potentially. Although it's confusing. Shani and I went back and forth about what this means actually. Like, how could this not be pikuach nefesh beforehand? It sounds like
calm him down. Maybe they would give him a warm bath and would put him to sleep.
Good to calm him down. Yeah, so it's definitely a cholet type of situation as well, or a mitzvah or something like that.
But it's not. But it's not a sakana. It's not
a sakana at that point.
Right.
So.
I think part of my question was.
Or you need to clean them up.
Mm-hmm. So, Shani, what was that? Sorry.
Yeah, I think part of my question was, if it's not about sakana, then. But like you're cleaning the child for the purpose of the milah, then why isn't it right? Like if I wasn't able to do that, does that not make the milah sakana? If it doesn't, then why am I using hot water? Like I just think that the question, it doesn't seem like super clear.
You're saying once it's, how can it be on the one hand not to save his life, not to help him? On the other hand, why is it a requirement of the milah? It's not bringing a knife. It's not. It's nothing that has to do with the milah, hot water. You don't have to have hot water at a milah.
It's been suggested here, if the child's dirty, then there may be a requirement for the milah as well. I mean, you got to clean him up. He's got stuff floating on his body.
Or maybe the definition of for a mitzvah is broader than we're thinking. It's not just in order to enable the mitzvah, but even to maybe Hiddur mitzvah, to do the mitzvah in a nicer way, to have the child look good. In other words, it could be that the for a mitzvah could mean not that it was mitzvah wouldn't be able to be done without this, but just for the sake in the action of doing the mitzvah.
So Lexi asks a great question because it actually comes to the next story, and I want to bring this up with the Tosfot if I have another minute. Right, there's a story that shows up a little bit later on the daf about a child again where they spilled the water, and a mother who is there's a whole debate about how long a mother is in danger after giving birth for a child. Is it 3 days? Is it 7 days? But what happens is it's the 8th day. The child needs to do milah. They spill the water, and they say, well, the mother might be in some sort of danger, so you can ask a non-Jew to heat the water for her, and then use the extra for the child. Essentially, it's like this, derech agav, and the Tosfot actually. Oh,
that's brought the
halacha. Yeah, and so similar to I had my own experience that my son, who we just saw, was born on Erev Yom Kippur. Rachel in the hospital the next day, was considered to be under sakana. It wasn't required to fast in that sense because she had just given birth. In fact, even more so for her.
So that you could also eat the food.
No, I wish that were the case, but it doesn't go like that, unfortunately. Yeah. But anyway, the Tosfot there actually challenges and says, in this very confusing Tosfot, it's the first one on Samachet Amud Aleph, which had me, it says, Ve'im Tomar, de Bahuya Nuka, de la Kaman, De amar lahu Rava nishale le'imei. All right. Itzricha nechemuha le'agav imei. Says right. Rava says in there, let's ask about for the mother, and if she needs it, we'll heat the water for the mother, right? And he says, "Kilo tzricha nami," but also even if she didn't need, you should be able to heat it for her. All right. And then he gets in. I won't even go into it further, but the Maharsha explains the Tosfot actually doesn't have the last line there. The ipe ma said the lepe ma. I mean, not that one. The hamar lo amar lenochri zilachim. That you never ask the non-Jew to heat it, and that there might actually be a version out there that allows you to even ask the non-Jew to heat water on Shabbat for the tinok. So I couldn't find a girsa like that, but.
And what is the nafkamina between those two? If you had to,
so one would be you're allowed to ask him to bring something, to do a derabanan, right? Which is to like go through through the chatzer, which is only a derabanan isur, but you aren't allowed to ask him to do a deraita, a real malacha, just a shvut. The other one is like, yeah, you can ask him to do a malacha potentially to actually heat the water. So
we're going to see that's a machloket rishonim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
We're going to see that. So it's right here in this Gemara whether that girsa makes a machloket rishonim. Because if you have the girsa the way we have it, it seems like you can only ask him to do a rabbinic thing even when a mitzvah is involved.
Exactly. And if you look actually the Reef, I wish I did bring in that source sheet. It's the very last source, and I bolded it. And he says, Ben Amirah Maaseh sheyesh ba isura deoraita, uben Amirah she'in ba isura maaseh deoraita. The hamar lo amar. I actually skipped that. Sorry, I was continuing the sentence. The hamar lo amar le zil achim li. The hu maaseh isur deraita. Ela amar le zil atili v'shatikle v'lo matzat tshuva. All right, the shatikle, like he has no response to this counter challenge, but he says, yeah, the whole reason you can do this here is because you're allowed to ask for the sake of a mitzvah for a non-Jew to do a derabanan isur, but not to do a deraita isur. And so this is against that reading of the Tosfot here. So that Tosfot leads you then to, which I think someone else is going to do, the Tosfot in Gitin, where that actually, even though the Tosfot brings up the idea you can ask for a deraita, they're going to make it a huge okimta on this whole thing about when you can actually ask, and not just for any mitzvah. So yeah. Thank
you very much. Excellent. Let's go right to it. You just led into our next presenter, Avni.
Sure.
Who's going to do that? Gittin.
Going to try to share the screen. Is it visible? Oh, wait.
You have shared your screen. It'll take a minute. Now it came up. Yep, we got it.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so this actually came up last week. I remember someone mentioned it. I don't remember who it was talking about. Or we learned it, and then someone anyway talking about buying property, buying land in Israel through someone on Shabbat, and from that the Tosfot are going to get into both the Gemara that Joel just talked about and the one that Lexi mentioned, which is later on in the same daf with a similar setup. So quickly, the Gemara here is V'akonesa de beSuria kekoneh beparvarei Yerushalayim. So we're saying the ways in which buying a field in Syria is similar to buying a field in the area of Jerusalem. Lemay hilchata amarav. What's the relevant law legal situation for this? Amarav sheshet. Lomar lekotvin alav ono ve'afilu b'Shabbat. That you're allowed to write a contract buying the land even on Shabbat. B'Shabbat still kedatach. Kede'amar Rava omer le'oved LeAkum ve'oseh. So you do this by telling a non-Jew to write it for you. Achinami amar le'oved kochavim ve'oseh af al gav דאמירה לעובד כוכבים שבות משום יישוב ארץ ישראל לא גזור רבנן. So here it says this is like a complete exception to the shvut rule of not being allowed to say to a non-Jew to do something like to do a melacha on Shabbat, because Rabbanan didn't gazar on something on something like Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So now, just to give an overview, like we were saying, the Tosfot here is going to say that this is only for this particular mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael and not for other mitzvot. And then it's going to bring an example of like an extreme other mitzvah that you would think might allow it, like Brit Milah, and say that even there it's not, and that's where our other Gemaras are going to come in from in Rubin. So Afal Gab, the Amirah LeOved Kochavim. By the way, can you see my mouse also, the cursor also? Great. אף אגב, דאמרה לעובד כוכבים שבות, משום יישוב ארץ ישראל לא גזרו רבנן, אבל משום מצווה אחרת לא היינו מתירים אמירה לעובד כוכבים במלאכה דאורייתא. So it's important that it's specifically דאורייתא. That's going to come up. So just to go through it, but for any other mitzvah, we are not so lenient about speaking to a non-Jew, to tell them to do a melacha that is d'oraita. Kedemuchach beperek hadar, as it is proven in this story, the second story about the spilled water of the baby that Joel mentioned. Hahu yanuka de eshtafich chamime atu lekame lerava amar lehu leshayle leime itzricha nichaimu leagav ime. And so this is what Lexi was mentioning. It says there was a baby that they spilled out the hot water for bathing it. And what do? You go to the mother and you ask her if she needs hot water, and so she says she needs, and then you heat up the water for the mother, and then you have enough water for the baby too. V'lichora mashma debiyom hamilah haya שהיו צריכים לחממו כדי למולו. And so it seems that the situation is that it's on the day of the baby's milah, and they had to warm it up in order to be able to do the Brit Milah. V'kodem milah haya, and this is what we're talking about, that it's davka before the milah happens. De'i la'achar hamilah mesukan hu ubelo eme mechalalin alav Shabbat. This is what we were just saying, that if it's after the milah, then you wouldn't be asking this question at all. You would just heat up the water. You wouldn't be thinking of workarounds. You would just heat up the water for the baby because it's a sakana. Ve'al yedei oved kochavim ayrei hatam. But in this case, okay, so that seems, so how does this prove that that we are only, ve'al yedei oved kochavim ayrei hatam. So the way the Tosafot are arguing that you can, that this, in the case of Brit Milah, you don't ask a non-Jew, is because in this statement, I don't see it here, but in the Gemara itself, it is printed that you do this by telling a non-Jew to heat up the water for you. Now, why, if you're telling the non-Jew to heat the water for you and it's for a Brit Milah, why would you need to ask the mother to make it a justified action? Because you're not allowed to tell the non-Jew to do the melacha of heating the water for the baby, even though it's needed for Brit Milah. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so but now I'm actually going to skip, and we'll come back to this. He brings the explanation of Rashi, and then dismisses the explanation of Rashi. But now you have to ask the question, okay, so if that's the case, then why are we asking the non-Jew at all? Because we have this allowance to heat up the water for the woman who has just given birth. So we should just do it ourselves. Whereas it says as Joel said, whereas it says that we do it by asking a non-Jew. V'nire, and now I'm skipping down to here, v'nire delo yitachen lomar benachin al yedei Israel. We're not going to allow this to happen, them to heat up the water by a Jew themselves. The al yedei Israel haya asur laharbot bishvil katan, because while the Jew is allowed to heat up the water for the health of the new mother, they're not allowed to heat up more water so that it's enough for the mother and for the baby, or put it another way, that water is then not allowed to use for the baby because the baby is not allowed to get the
right. We had another the contrary case is like shchita, where you can shecht an animal. Once you shechted it, now if it's Yom Tov, let's say, you needed to shecht it for pekuach nefesh or something, now everybody can eat it.
Well, there's a couple of...
Because there's no fear that you'll be marbe.
So there's a couple of different things there. You mentioned that it's in Yom Tov. We'll get to that at the end, that Yom Tov is different from Shabbat in this case, I think. And the other thing is, indeed, because when you shecht an animal, you shecht the whole animal, and then you have enough for everyone. You can't make it more...
You're not going to be marbe, right?
The candle and the medulla we were talking about. Where was I? Sorry. כדאמר בפרק כמה דחולין, המבשל לחולה בשבת אסור לבריא. So if someone cooks for someone on Shabbat, you're not allowed, the healthy person is not allowed to eat this. So in this case, the sick person is the new mother, and the healthy person is the child. גזירה שמא ירבה בשבילו. This is a restriction lest one cook more for the other person. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, you should wrap it up. You have another 2 minutes.
Okay. אבל על ידי עובד כוכבים ניחא דשערי להרבות. So the Tosfot then come and assert that this does not apply to a non-Jew, the issue of making more, of enjoying from the extra. ושמה דווקא לצורך המילה. So דווקא לצורך המילה הוא דשערי, אבל לצורך דבר אחר, אפילו על ידי עובד כוכבים אסור להרבות. So in general, you aren't allowed to enjoy from the extra that the non-Jew says. That's what we were looking at last week or 2 weeks ago. But for something as important as milah, you are. On the other hand, milah is not important enough that you can just rely on that. Rather, you need the double of it being both extra and both like extra, i.e. prepared for the woman and then used also for the baby, and it needs to be by the hands of a non-Jew. And then, yeah, so there's like lower level that you're not allowed to enjoy it at all. Then there's that level, and there's the third level of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, which you are allowed to do both. There are a few more things I could I could go on. Then it brings up the question of cases where it says that it does.
You better stop. Wait, let's just give the bottom line of this Tosfos, I think, is that he's asserting that you can't. What is he asserting? You tell me.
The bottom line of the Tosfot is that you can't have a non-Jew perform a deoraita act for the sake of almost any mitzvah except Yishuv. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is the only case where you can, apparently. Even for enabling the mitzvah of Brit Milah, you have to have the double of it be a non-Jew, and of it be telling a non-Jew to do it, and it be just making extra. And there's a
in other words, the case was anyway a Jew could have done it in this case because it was actually pikuach nefesh. It was pikuach nefesh. So actually, he's teaching us an amazing idea, which is that normally, and not related to our topic with so much, but normally we say that when pikuach nefesh is involved, the chachamim, the rabbis should do the avera, should do the quote unquote avera. They should do the malacha because it's a mitzvah now because it's pikuach nefesh.
Right.
But it's also saying as an exception, if you want to also benefit for others of that malacha, then you should ask a Gentile to do it.
Right.
In other words, if I want to go with my wife to the hospital, it's better to have a Gentile driving the ambulance because then I can benefit from the work that he's doing for pikuach nefesh for my wife.
Right.
For example.
Yeah. There's one other point that in the part that we skipped over, he explained.
There may be other ways to allow a Jew, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That would be better. Yeah.
This just feels very counterintuitive to the notion that if pikuach nefesh is involved, that we shouldn't make things like the same reason why I would say if pikuach nefesh is involved, the chacham should do it because it's a mitzvah. I would also say if pikuach nefesh is involved, we shouldn't make it harder to do this thing. Like
no, we're not making it harder. We just want to benefit. We just want to, chaparain, as they say in Yiddish.
But the assumption is if all things are equal, and you want to get an extra benefit, use the non-Jew. But if there's any slight change, then the Jew has his own car or whatever it is, then you go with the Jew. But then you don't get the extra benefit.
You shouldn't wait.
Right.
All right. Well, we got to stop there. Or you want to say one last thing, Yavni?
Oh, just to this question, I think it's different from the case of the ambulance because the pikuach nefesh is if the new mother is saying like I need hot water, whereas in this case we're going to the new mother and saying you need hot water, don't you? And like taking advantage of the case that she has a blanket pikuach nefesh for those.
I understand.
7
okay,
days.
Good point. All right, wait. Can you stop sharing the screen so that I can have my screen back? Thank you very much, Yavni. Next, actually, I want to show you a Ron. Just a second, and I will share my screen. There. So you should see my screen now. Yes, Joel says yes. Okay, so it's a full screen. You see, right? You see.
Yeah, but is it possible for you to zoom in at all?
Yeah. Ooh.
There we go.
That's zoomed in.
I'm getting old.
Yeah. So this is the Ran, and it's regarding Amirah LeAkum. And basically, we just saw Tosfos saying that it's you can't do it for any mitzvah except, Yeshuva Aretz, you could ask a goy, and actually has a very strong support for that because the Gemara itself says for Yeshuva Aretz you can do it, and the fact that the Gemara is saying specifically for Yeshuva Aretz you can do it sort of implies that only for Yeshuva Aretz. And then he goes to explain that even Mila, you cannot ask a Gentile to do an actual malacha unless it's pikuach nefesh or unless it's not an actual malacha. And now we're going to see that's the opinion basically of the Rambam and the Rif, like we saw. But now we're going to see the other side of the coin. Unfortunately, I don't know, he doesn't bring so much of a proof, but let's read. The Nimsa, I'm just sort of jumping right into the end here. The Nimsa Paskan Shel Dvarim Lefi Shitazu comes out according to this opinion. She Matirin Amirah Lenochri Afilu B'Malacha Gemura, even if an actual malacha, I can't even read those letters now. Legabe Machshirei Mila, regarding Machshirei Mila. So that's our sugya. In other words, we're doing a malacha. He learns the Gemara differently. Even we're doing a malacha. Ve'im Bat lashvot shar mitzvot lemachshirei mila kederech shehu שהשווה אותן הרמב"ם ז"ל לפי שיטתו, וכמו שנכתוב בסמוך, בסייעתא דשמיא. אף בכל מצוות נתיר, in other words, since Mila is not a special one, remember, Joel, you were trying to say that Mila, you're saying that Tosfos maybe holds that Mila is exceptional. So the Rambam says, no, it's not exceptional. And once we say it's not exceptional, and once we've also said that Mila, you can do a malacha for, I guess his gears of the Gemara was not that you told the goy to bring water, but you told the goy to boil water. So he says, Af bekol mitzvot natir Amirah, here, I'm over here. Af bekol mitzvot natir Amirah lenachri. Afilu b'melecha gemura. Then it comes out that if we're going to allow for Mila, we have to allow for every mitzvah. V'nira shezehu dat Rav Baal Ha'itur. And he says that this is what he sees in the words of the Baal Ha'itur, which we're not going to look at, but he understands the Baal Ha'itur to say this opinion. Shehetir lomar lenachri ladlik. Well, this is what the Baal Ha'itur said. He said you could tell the nachri ladlik lo et haner l'sudat Shabbat, that you could actually light a candle for having your Sudat Shabbat. You know, and that's not Pikuach Nefesh. It's just a mitzvah to have Sudat Shabbat. It's even a sort of a Kal mitzvah because, you know, it's a mitzvah. I don't know if it's a mitzvah d'oraita, mitzvah d'rabanan, I'm not sure. Oneg Shabbat, I guess. But anyway, you see this. So he's quoting the Baal Ha'itur, the name of the Baal Ha'itur, that the way he learns the Gemaras is that you can tell a Gentile to do any malacha gemura if it's in the case of a mitzvah. So that should be another psak that you should know about. This is it's not paskin. This Ran is not paskin in the Shulchan Aruch, but it might be useful in a certain circumstance to know this Ran. That you could even tell to do a malacha gemura. For, in other words, if you hold, I could say like this: if you hold that turning on a light is d'Rabbanan, then you can tell a Gentile to turn on the shul lights. Friday night, you come into the shul, it's all dark, and then somebody in the shul says, "Wait a second, the Chazon Ish says it's d'Oraita." You say, "Oh no, so for the Chazon Ish I have the Ran. For the Chazon Ish I can tell you, oh, if you say it's d'Oraita to turn on a switch, fine, the Ran would permit it even for that." So you have it's useful in answering up for a das yachid. You use one das yachid against another das yachid. This is very useful. Yeah.
Do you read this as the Ran's opinion or the Ran quoting the Baal Ha'itur?
Well, technically, it's the Ran quoting the Baal Ha'itur. He understands the Baal Ha'itur that way, but he doesn't argue on it. He definitely understands that's the way the Baal Ha'itur. I think he understands this is the way to learn the sugya. And then, as a proof, he brings that the Baal Ha'itur actually paskins that way.
But we do always attribute it to the Baal Ha'itur.
Yeah,
right. I mean, in doing so.
Well, I think the Beit Yosef brings it in. He says, "Haran kotev b'shem Baal Ha'itur."
I want to say two things. I want to say, in your very good presentation here, that first of all, it tells us the notion of being mitzarev. If you can find, you have this heter, you can find another heter, it makes things better. But it makes things better in a sense just because there's so many people against it. But in actuality, on the Baal Ha'itur on his own, he's pretty clear. You can tell a guy for a malacha, for a mitzvah, even as you said, a mitzvah that seems to be a mitzvah kala, but it's part of Shabbos, you can do a malacha gemura. But it's good to be mitzarev, if you can find a way. A hint would also be a tziruf, but it doesn't matter. If you have to, down to the wire, you have to say to the non-Jew, bring the water, brings the water.
Right, sometimes you don't have time and you need to have things done.
That's what I'm saying. Or he doesn't get the hint, which I have to tell you, that happens too.
All right, so now I'm giving Josh the great task of putting all this together and how we paskin and how the Shtur and the Shulchan Aruch.
Thank
Josh?
you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I hope my internet holds up. Tell me if I cut out, okay? And if you listened very well to Joel and Yavni, you'll have figured all of this out already because you can just extrapolate bits of Tosfot. But just in case, I'll spell it out in the Shulchan Aruch. So welcome to my screen. And Shulchan Aruch writes like this: דבר שאינו מלאכה ואינו אסור לעשותו בשבת אלא משום שבות, מותר לישראל לומר לעכו"ם לעשותו בשבת. Okay, so anything which is shvut, you can ask a non-Jew to do on Shabbat. But it has to fall into one of the following three categories. והוא שיהיה שם מקצת חולי, או יהיה צריך לדבר צורך הרבה, או מפני מצווה. Okay, so we have three possible conditions when you'd be allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a shvut. One would be a little bit of choli. It's not clear exactly how much is a little bit, but it's clear that if it was more than a little bit, then you're talking about a chole, I don't know, chole sheyesh bo sakana. And then the greatest rabbi would be doing it, and not, you wouldn't be asking the non-Jew. Or tzorech harbe, it's also not clear what that is, but it's to do with the major financial loss, I think. Or mipnei mitzvah. Okay, or you need it for a mitzvah. And we had that hinted before. Ketzad. Okay, and I was going to bring an example. Omer Yisrael LeAkum. I can't switch tabs. One second. It's embarrassing.
You can share your whole computer also. You can share your whole screen, or you can share part of your screen.
How do I do that? Try that. So you can ask the non-Jew, בשבת, לעלות באילן להביא שופר, לתקוע תקיעת מצווה. Okay, so this is it's quite a common case. You ask a non-Jew to climb up a tree to bring a shofar for you. I suppose it's Shabbat Rosh Hashanah. First day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat.
Which is confusing to begin with, but...
Right. Exactly why this is the prime example. And he's quoting here...
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But he's quoting here verbatim from the Rambam. So you can ask him to climb up a tree to bring a shofar.
Which is forbidden to climb a tree rabbinically.
Right. It's Xera Shema, you'll break off a branch, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Maybe muktzah. I don't know. But so this is the example of a mitzvah. או להביא מים דרך חצר שלא ירבו, לרחוץ בו המצטער. Or you can ask someone to bring water through chatzer, and tiltol in a chatzer is Isur D'Rabbanan, and you can ask them to bring that in order to wash someone who needs that urgently. And we have, again, all these Gemaras in the background, especially the one of Milah, I guess, 19th chapter of Shabbat, and also the one from Eruvin that Joel brought. And importantly, Vayesh Osrin. Okay, so we have asking Shvut from a non-Jew is allowed, and we have a second opinion, Vayesh Osrin. Okay, and the Ramah says, Vilakaman.
Wait, point out the Baragola here.
I was going to do that later. That was my
Okay.
pedagogical
All right.
thing.
Excuse me.
No. We'll get there.
Okay.
Just the Ramah says very quickly, Velakaman Siman Taf Kuf Pei Vav Pasak Latir. So he goes according to the first opinion. Vayen Le'el Siman Resh Ayin Vav, which we did last week. Desh Mekilim Afilu B'Malacha Deoraita. Okay, and there are those who allow even B'Malacha Deoraita, L'tzorach Mitzvah, and that's the Ran or the Bal Haitur quoted by the Ran. Okay, so we have here three different shitot. One is that you're allowed. One is that you're allowed to ask a shvut. One is that you're not allowed to ask a shvut, and one is you're allowed to ask even Doraita. Okay, and just we'll look at the Bergola. Also because Rav Nachum asked me to, and also because Rabbi Nachman said that whenever you read Shulchan Aruch, your eyes should flick to Bergola. So who are these three shitot? The first one is the Tur, B'Shem Rambam. Okay, I'm not sure why it says Tur B'Shem Rambam, because the Tur seems to be against this. But it says Tur B'Shem Rambam, והרב המגיד כתב שזה מוסכם מהגאונים, והגת מרדכי בשם רביע. Okay, so lots of people on that side. The second, ויש אוסרין, is שם בשם התוספות. Okay, בגיטין, בבבא קמא. Okay, and that's the Tosfot the Yavni showed us.
How did we see that in that Tosfot?
Because I don't know how much we'll get into the Beit Yosef, but I think basically he reads that Tosfot as saying this is a very, very limited case of the Mila that you're allowed to do a shvut through a non-Jew.
Mm-hmm.
You can't apply that to anything else.
Okay, great.
Okay, and so we have again shvut is Rambam, Yesh Osrim is the Tosfot, and the Ramah we have here. The Taz brings Hainu Bal Haitur. Okay, and then Bal Haitur is scared that we're going to listen to the Ramah, so he makes sure that we understand. כבר כתב רמה לאל, יש להחמיר, וכן עיקר, כי הוא יחיד נגד רבים. Okay, this Itur is a lone wolf. But he exists, and he keeps popping up, and the Rama, at least in this case,
mentions him. If you mention him, then you're basketing like him.
Right, it mentions him passively, I think, without any critique. Right.
Yesh Mekalim. That means that whenever there's a yesh like that in the Ramah, he's saying in Shas HaDachak, you can rely on that.
Right. I think that's the important thing here. I was going to go to the tour, but I don't know how much to bring from this. I'll just say that the Torah brings obviously all the opinions we had before. The Beit Yosef begins by saying, Mashma milashon Rabbeinu demaskanato la'achmir kedat Tosfot. Okay, so he says, even though the Torah brings in the Rambam, he doesn't hold like the Rambam. And here the Beit Yosef brings another shita, בשם רביה, דאמירה לאקום דאורייתא נמי לא אסורה, אלא בדבר שאי אפשר למצוא תקנה על ידי ישראל לעשותו. Okay, and that's something we didn't see before. I don't know, what's the Ein Vav Shin?
Where? Oh, it's
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay. In any case, he brings this thing that it brings a kind of middle position that you can ask a non-Jew to do a deoraita if there was no other way to fix this, if there was no other way to do it in a kind of more legal way, I think. כגון לאחינו חמים, אבל אם אפשר לעשותו כגון ברשות הרבים, זה יכול להביא על ידי מחיצות בני אדם, שרי אמירה לעקום. Okay. But
in other words,
then
he's saying that the only time you can't you can't ask a Gentile to do a deraita would be if there's no way of getting the same job done by a Jew. In other words, if you had some way, it would just be easier to have a Gentile do it, then you can't ask him. But this is where there's a mitzvah involved or where there's not a mitzvah involved.
Right. So then the quote is without a mitzvah. Then if you see the next bit I underlined, אפשר דלא התיר אלא לדבר מצווה דווקא, אבל שלא לדבר מצווה לא. Okay. The Beit Yosef is saying, oh, he must have been talking about a mitzvah, and then he just completely trashes it. מכל מקום אין דבריו מובנים לי, וצריך עיון. Okay, so he doesn't even quote it later on in the Shulchan Aruch, and that opinion gets thrown out. Then he brings this infamous Baal Hayitur, שמותר לומר לעקום להדליק לו נר לסעודת שבת. Okay, if there's a mitzvah involved, you can ask even a deoraita melacha. And then he brings the Tosfot, and which we saw already, so I won't go into it. Just he proves Zehu Dat Rabbeinu. He proves that this is the opinion of the Tur. I found it. He's machmir like the Tosfot. I found this interesting. This quote. He says later on in Siman Shin Lamed Chet, Avi HaEzri says, or is quoted by the Tur, that you can ask non-Jews to play musical instruments at weddings that kind of, I guess they begin on Friday and stretch into Shabbat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's only D'Rabbanan.
Right. It's only D'Rabbanan. So the Amirah LeAkum b'mkom mitzvah shar. So the Avi HaEzri basically is holding like the Rambam.
Yeah, because that's a rabbinic prohibition. Right.
B'mkom mitzvah.
B'mkom mitzvah.
Yeah. And then the Tur writes on that, ואני כתבתי למעלה שאין להתיר אמירה לעקום אלא בדבר שהוא עצמו דוחה שבת כגון מילה. So the Tur there has a definite opinion, and he says, no, we don't ask non-Jews to do anything, even a shvut, except for this limited case of mitzvah,
right.
Of a milah, and so on.
In other words,
go on.
You can't say that Shabbat is not doche Shabbat, or a chatuna is not doche Shabbat. Even though it's a mitzvah, it's not doche Shabbat. So therefore, whereas a milah is doche Shabbat, it doesn't make sense though, because then you could do it if milah is doche Shabbat. What does it mean? Okay, I'm just thinking, yeah.
Okay, just I'll take one more minute because this thing of the Rashba that the Beit Yosef finishes with is very important, I think, and it's quoted by everyone, the Magen Avraham and everyone. So the Rashba says, "She'en omrim b'shvutin zo dome lezo, ve'en lanu behem ela ma she'tiru befirush." Okay, so all this thing of shvut, you don't make any jumps, any extrapolations from one thing to the other. Only what you're explicitly told you're allowed to do, or you're allowed to say to a non-Jew, but don't make general categories from this, because there's such a balagan in all the different laws. שהרי לעתים מתירים אותה מחמת דבר אחר שיראה קל, because sometimes they're allowed for different reasons. And then
this is part of their rejection of the Baal Yitur.
The Baal Eitor did exactly that. The Baal Eitor took this thing of
Took
Mila and
that
says,
right.
yeah, that's a general principle.
The Baal Eitor is in the right. In other words,
Right.
we have Gemaras that say that for a Shabbat you can tell. Sorry, for Mila you can tell a Gentile to do something. So for Mila you can tell people to do something, and that's it. Don't start coming up with other exceptions of this shvut.
Right, and here he says, no, sometimes you're allowed to ask non-Jews to write for you and to buy a house in the land of Israel, and sometimes you're even allowed to, like even in karet cases, like Haza'ah and Ismail and Brit Milah, like Joel was saying. So there's so many different cases involved. Don't make any general statements. And I think I'll stop there.
No, it's interesting. Rashba. The Rashba was saying there that. Yeah, go ahead, Rav Landis.
No, I would just say is that Shvut. One of the reasons to say that you can't learn one Shvut from another, or a way to explain that, is to say that Shvut is actually an issue of public policy. Right? It's Gezerah Takana Shetiknu Chachamenu. And so they have a public policy, and the public policy is all geared to some sort of observance of Shabbos or creating a certain kind of Shabbos. But when it comes to public policy, it's not as much as based on logic or based on a drasha, which are the two fundamental principles of D'Oraisa. In D'Oraisa, you do it out of a drasha, or you do it out of an aspect of logic. Donim din zemizeh, zumizu. But when you deal with a shvut, you're dealing with internal public policy, and each one seems to be individual. That's the argument against. Baal Eitor wouldn't be makabel that at all. And we could never, don't forget the Baal Eitor. Keep that Baal Eitor in your back pocket.
Well, great, guys. I think this was a very excellent shir. You guys all did great jobs. Now we, of course, in Israel we don't have Gentiles to ask so much, at least on Shabbat. But anyway, thank you very much to all of you.
Yesh Kayach.
Next week, you don't have much time to prepare.
I'm sorry. Lexi has a good comment here. To be interesting to see if there were distinctions made between Shvutim that are intuitive derivatives of an Av Malacha versus those that are made almost exclusively for Shabbos atmosphere.
Right, well,
good
we do have a concept of Ke'ein D'Oraita Tiknu.
Ke'ein D'Oraita.
Ke'ein D'Oraita Tiknu means that, at least we say that sometimes by certain Shvutim, that we assume that the rabbis gave it the same parameters as whatever the D'Oraita law was in that case. And then we can start using our logic. And the Rashba is saying, yeah, okay, maybe in those cases, but in general, a Shvut that has no parallel, let's say, in the D'Oraita, we have no right to guess when they wanted to apply it and when they didn't. We don't know what their logic was. Interesting. I mean, I don't think we really paskin like that because we have klalim. We have klalim like, we saw shvut to shvut. We talked about last week. Shvut to shvut. Makom tsar. Everybody agrees that you can be lenient, even regard. And then we brought up the shita that even in a single shvut you could be lenient in a makom tsar. We didn't start say it, so I don't think we paskin like this Rashba, but it's very interesting.
I want to also add Yesh Koyach, everyone. Really,
yeah, Yesh Koyach. I was very impressed. I learned a lot. Next week, I think we're going to do Grama. I'll try to send you out sources. You have it's the last year, and hopefully I'll get them out before Shavuot, so you can look them over on Shavuot. Okay, Laila Tov, everyone.
Thank you.
Sure.